Hope you're well. Hello again. I'm here to talk about one of my favorite artists and one of your favorite artists, Richard D. James, aka Pac-Man, aka Caustic Window, aka Polygon Window, aka Aphex Twin, aka Go Fuck Yourselves. We have Aphex Twin, and we love him. And I'm going to talk about the new Digeridoo reissue, re-release, remaster, whatever the fuck. I was listening to this, I saw it pop up, and it just brought all kinds of memories back. And I'll talk about that because all I can really do that hasn't been said about Aphex Twin is talk about my own experience with Aphex Twin. Because Aphex Twin's one of those artists that we've talked about to death, and it's just boring at this point. So I will give you my take and my approach and my experience with Richard D. James because he does mean a lot to me. He means a lot to a lot of us. His music is from another planet, and he's one of those few artists that deserves all of the accolades he gets. A lot of times when artists get famous and they're well known and revered, most times I don't know that I agree with it, but with Richard James, I do. Sometimes the public at large just gets shit right. Richard James is he's a true original. He's a true character, and his music is truly original. Stuff he was doing over 30 years ago still sounds ahead of its time. For example, Digeridoo. Now, I had only heard my experience with Aphex Twin. I had only heard one, well, actually two. I'd heard two other Aphex Twin records. One of them, he wasn't going under Aphex Twin. It was the Pac-Man Power Pill 12-inch. That is the first time I officially ever heard Richard James doing anything. And he did a record with Tom Middleton from Global Communication called Schizophrenia, but he didn't really, I don't know how much he actually had to do with that. I think he just assisted Tom Middleton. I don't know. But I did have that record as well. But the first time I heard an Aphex Twin record was the Analog Bubble Bath 12-inch on Mighty Force Records. That record came out, I want to say 1991. I'm sorry if I'm getting the year wrong. Maybe it was early 92. I feel like I was 19 or 18 when that came out. That would be 1991. And it blew me away. And it was this very nondescript 12-inch. It's just it has a white label, it has a stamp on it, and that was it. It came on a generic sleeve. It was very mysterious, but holy shit, the music on it blew me away. I still listen to it to this day, and it still blows me away. Didgeridoo is only the second Aphex Twin record with Aphex Twin on the cover of the sleeve that I heard. And so when you think of Aphex Twin and all the things he's done, like the Selected Ambient Works albums and the Richard D. James album and Surfing on Sine Waves and all of the Analog Bubble Bath and Drugs and I Care Because You Do. I mean, you could go on and on. The On 12-inch, Come to Daddy, Window Liquor. My God, his body of work is amazing. We all know that. But Didgeridoo was the first time the world became aware of Aphex Twin collectively. You have dorks and nerds like me who were listening closely and already knew of Aphex Twin because of the Mighty Force record, but Didgeridoo was the record that propelled him into the limelight. That was the record. That was the release. And I know this because I was there. I was reading the papers, the music papers, I was reading the interviews, I was buying the records. Didgeridoo was the first time Aphex Twin made a dent in our world. It just is what it is. So this record means a lot to me because it deserves all of the accolades it gets. As I mentioned before, this record is one of his best and one of his most forward thinking and one of his weirdest and just one of his most brilliant records. And not just because of Didgeridoo. There are three other tracks on this 12-inch. You have Flaphead, you have Floam, and you have Isoproflex. Now, for me personally, My favorite song on this EP has always been Isoproplex. I used to play that in the clubs and it just worked. It was harsh. I'd have to be playing a techno set when I played it, but it worked. It really worked. It's very intense, just like Digeridoo is intense, but playing Digeridoo is not a club track. That's not a song you get away with playing in a club. I think I tried playing it a few times and the audience just kind of looked at me, but to me that was part of the joy for me is pissing off the audience. I mean, I don't do it. Well, I haven't DJed for a while, but I ceased doing that at a certain point as I got older. But when I was younger, I was all about playing songs that pissed the audience off. And there are a few other songs in a club that would piss people off more than Didgeridoo. And that brought a smile to my face. I always enjoyed doing this. It's just fun. It's fun annoying people, and when you're DJing, at least it was then. And I have a feeling that maybe Richard James feels the same way. As a DJ, I always enjoyed playing the music and being involved in the music scene, but I hate club culture. I've always hated it. I don't know if that makes sense, but I love club music. I hate club culture. Probably makes no sense to the majority of you, but Didgeridoo was, um, yeah, it was one of those Mount Rushmore of electronic moments. It was an amazing experience to hear this song that sounded like nothing else. I mean, not only did it sound like nothing else, and it still doesn't, but it just sounded so far removed from anything that had been, you know, anything that had a genre, anything that could be easily tagged, anything that could be easily described. It was so far away from any of that. And when I listen to it to this day, I always think of those things. That's why this music and this record means so much to me. Whenever I think of Aphex Twin, if someone says Aphex Twin, my mind immediately goes to the Didgeridoo record, that little boomerang on the cover. To me, that's just that was the beginning of the Aphex Twin experience. That's where it started. This is when people started perking their ears up and started talking about Aphex Twin. Like, who is this guy? What is this? Another important aspect of Didgeridoo that we have to remember is this was like the first drum and bass record. You might not hear it. I mean, there are other arguments like Radio Babylon by Meat Beat Manifesto was a big record in the drum and bass world. But in terms of like modern like jungle and stuff like that, Didgeridoo was, I should say, one of the first. Maybe it's arguable. It's an arguable point. There is an argument and a debate to be had, but Didgeridoo is one of those Mount Rushmore jungle tracks. It just is. Go ask Liam Howlett from The Prodigy. I think he'd probably tell you the same thing. Didgeridoo is one of those holy shit moments, not just in electronic music, but if you're going to get meta about it and talk about drum and bass, it's a huge moment in drum and bass and jungle as well. Huge record. And then the rest of the record is just like crazy whacked out techno, like Isoproflex. Now, getting to this remaster, as I was looking at the track listing, I did pick up the record. It's a double pack, which is cool. It came out on RNS Records, just like the original did. The digital version has two more tracks. This is when I get annoyed with buying records, and this is why I'm disillusioned with buying as many records as I have in the past. You get two more tracks on the digital version, so I would recommend you listen to the digital version and pick that up. You're getting more music. But I noticed it's called the CR7E versions, and I took notice of this because I have an old tape deck called the CR7E. It's a tape deck. And when I saw that, I was like, did Aphex Twin use the CR7E? Is that what this is? And I read up on it and he did. These are like old tape versions, different versions he would use for live shows and things like this. Now, I hope I'm getting all this right. I read this on the internet. I think it was Juno. I bought the record at Juno and they had mentioned that. I have one of these old CR7E tape decks. I think it's from the 80s, maybe the 70s. I don't know. But I guess he used these, Richard James did. He used these during his live shows. And I just was so excited to see that he was using the same tape deck that I have. I don't have mine hooked up, but I've had the same tape deck for years. I got mine back in the 80s. I'm assuming Richard James did too. I don't know. Now, these different versions, The didgeridoo versions are fine. There's like a live version, like he did a live version in Cornwall where he's from. The versions of didgeridoo I didn't find to be that different than the original. They are different, but not strikingly different. They sound very similar. The versions that I enjoy more than anything else are the Isoproplex versions. Now, again, I mentioned that's my favorite song on this EP anyway. But there's a slow version of Isoproplex. Um, and I love it. I never thought I'd hear a version that maybe rivaled that original, but the slow version's amazing. Love the slow version. Now, again, I've had this record in my life for 32 years, so to now hear a new I know it's old, but it's a new version to me. I'm listening to this new version and it sounds, I mean, it could have come out today and it would sound brilliant. Like that's how different Richard James is. That's how special he is. He just put out a track that's 32 years old and it's a different version than one of the songs he released anyway, and it still sounds fresh. That is why we love Aphex Twin. That's why I should say, that's why I love Aphex Twin. And this is why I think he deserves all of the praise he gets. He's such a special personality and talent that it doesn't matter what he does, even over 30 years ago, it still sounds fresh and new. I love this new Digeridoo release, and I hope he does more of this kind of shit. Like if he did Xylem Tube. If he would re-release Xylem Tube, that would be great. Maybe he's got different versions of that. I don't know. Different versions of On, different versions of anything. Would be really cool to hear. But I'm going to get out of here. I want to keep this video relatively short. I highly recommend picking up the new reissue of Digeridoo from Aphex Twin on R&S Records. It's brilliant. It's great. Just like everything else Aphex does. But I think it's interesting that his early stuff still sounds more ahead of its time than the recent stuff he's done. That's just an opinion. And maybe I'm just romanticizing the past and I'm being nostalgic. Nostalgia is a big factor when it comes to music. But for someone who was there day one in 1992 when Digeridoo dropped, to hear it now again, 32 years later, and hear these new versions, makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. And I still recognize Richard James's talent of releasing music that just sounds light years ahead of its time. It still does. It's still beautiful, and we still love Richard James. Pick this up. Don't even hesitate to buy it. It is worth every penny. All right, I will talk to you later. Goodbye.